you have to get very clear and very specific, almost like you'd be talking to a toddler. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of times you are talking to when you're dealing with a narcissist. Someone who's emotionally immature and is not willing to engage on a high level of saying, hey, this is what's actually going on. So you have to get very, very clear. When you're setting boundaries with a parent, with a family member, whatever it might be. If you're vague, like if you're ambiguous and you don't have extremely clear, it'll be even more ignored, more manipulated, especially manipulated because at that point, you don't know what you actually want. So I can manipulate it to be able to put it back on you. Do you struggle with setting boundaries with maybe a narcissistic parent or a family member? A lot of times we talk about setting boundaries with your partner, but what's that look like when it is your family member? Maybe it's difficult for you to communicate your needs, your expectations to that person, to that toxic person in your life, and maybe you're tired of just being manipulated and being controlled by them. If you guys are new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel to provide awareness, growth, healing, change, and development. I'm the founder of Raw Motivations, the creator of the NARC app, and your guide in the Clarity Challenge, which is at claritychallenge.net, a 45-day challenge to help you find you after toxicity, after the abuse. One of the reasons why I'm on social media is to help people understand more about narcissism, what it looks like, how it functions, how it shows up in my life, how it's affected and destroyed so many different things. And also to be able to provide a way for you to get free from that toxicity, to understand who you are, to develop a sense of purpose and direction that you haven't been able to have for a while because you've been isolated, because you've been sedated by being with a toxic person. In this aspect of setting boundaries, it's hard to be able to set boundaries with people that don't seem to care or that don't seem to respect your boundaries. It can be especially challenging when it is your family members, when it is your parents. In this video, I want to be able to talk about just the importance of setting those boundaries, some of the obstacles that come into it, and how to establish healthy boundaries in your life. So first off, we need to talk about just what are boundaries. Okay, boundaries are absolutely essential for maintaining healthy relationships and protecting your well-being. By setting boundaries, you end up communicating your needs and expectations to other people while you create a safe space for yourself. So a boundary, oftentimes people think of a boundary being a limit, being something that is controlling another person. I said, don't do that. Why did you just do that? Okay, something that is telling like a child to stop doing what they're doing. That is not a boundary. Unfortunately, a lot of times people get that confused. That is more of a limit, a rule, or a regulation. A boundary doesn't have you imposing your will on another person. A boundary has you taking care of you. How does this actually look? Well, part of the reason why we talk about this is because you have to understand you're not out there trying to control another person. You're not out there trying to manipulate the outcome or trying to force a different desired result from this person. You're out there to work on you and to develop you. So when we talk about this, getting to the aspect of having a solid boundary means you're not setting limits, rules, and regulations for another person, but instead a boundary is for you, the limit of how much you're going to take in the relationship, of what you're going to put up with in the interaction, of how you're going to respond to the communication, to the yelling, to the raging. That is what you're talking about in this aspect of a boundary. Think of it this way. A boundary is the limit. This is the highest amount that you're going to take. Oftentimes I say it's the limit of the shit that you're going to take. And when you get up to that limit, you're like, all right, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not going to communicate to you in this type of way. I'm not going to respond or react in this type of way. I'm not going to do this, and et cetera, et cetera. But it is about you, and it's not about the other person. So we need to understand boundaries are for you, not for the other person. That is like the single most thing that people get wrong and people get confused over and over again. Think about it this way. You might have someone in your relationship, so let's say a narcissistic parent, that constantly criticizes you, criticizes your choices, criticizes all these different things. And so you have to get to the place of understanding that setting a boundary, saying like, hey, those comments are really hurtful. And like, I would rather have a place to be able to set up a positive dynamic between us, but those comments are something that I really want to be a part of. It's not saying that they can't do those comments, but it's saying that that's not something you want to engage with. This is the hard part in dealing with a narcissist is you normally find people, narcissists, that don't care about you. They don't care about your thoughts, your likes, your opinions, your feelings, anything like that. And so as a result, you try to set a boundary and it doesn't get acknowledged. The hard part is when you just let it go. The hard part is when you don't actually hold the line and instead they realize that boundary really didn't matter. Well, some of the obstacles in setting this is the aspect that the narcissist is unwilling to change. Like, this is one of the hardest pieces. You set a boundary, and then the other person is like, yeah, I don't really care about your boundary. I don't really care about, like, what you're dealing with. I don't really care about how you feel in this current moment. And oftentimes, there's this giant resistance to any type of change. Like, they might end up trying to manipulate you or guilt trip you into accepting their behavior or into excusing away what they've been doing to you, or at the place where they're trying to be able to manipulate and control what you're actually saying, making them the victim. Think of it this way. You might have a boundary saying, hey, like, I'm not going to allow this person to talk to me like this, or I'm going to back away from the conversation, or I'm going to leave the house until this person cools off. Okay? Now, the other person is going to manipulate and guilt trip you, be like, why in the world are you giving up in the conversation? Like, excuse me, you can't be running away from this conversation. Like, I can't believe you don't care. There's all different types of things that will try to have a manipulative and emotionally abusive person flip it around on you and make you feel like you're the bad person for taking care of you. Oftentimes we see this in relationships where the narcissist is wanting something from you, something specific. And you're like, I'm not really comfortable with that. Why are you limiting me? Why are you controlling me? And it's all about trying to manipulate and control you when you just stated you had an opinion. You weren't going to do that. You weren't going to go that direction. You weren't going to give in to their opinion or what they wanted in that exact moment. That can be extremely hard for a lot of people to work through because a narcissist typically is not going to change their behavior. They're just going to try to modify yours. And they're going to make it very challenging for you to be able to establish and to hold any boundaries at all. Now, think of it this way in the form of a narcissistic parent. Okay, they might try to undermine your efforts saying, hey, you're being way too dramatic. Like, I can't believe you don't appreciate everything I've done for you. Aren't you grateful that I have a roof over your head? And you see this kind of manipulation go back and forth of trying to make sure that, like, they get what they want, and it's not about you. It's about what they did, what they have, what they have to offer, all these different pieces. All right, so when we're talking about setting up boundaries, what are we actually going to do? First off, it needs to be clear and specific. Like, you have to get very clear and very specific, almost like you'd be talking to a toddler. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of times you are talking to when you're dealing with a narcissist. Someone who's emotionally immature and is not willing to engage on a high level of saying, hey, this is what's actually going on. So you have to get very, very clear. When you're setting boundaries with a parent, with a family member, whatever it might be. If you're vague, like if you're ambiguous and you don't have extremely clear, it'll be even more ignored, more manipulated, especially manipulated because at that point, you don't know what you actually want. So I can manipulate it to be able to put it back on you. So you have to communicate these expectations and consequences of violating these boundaries. Now, you have to be really careful though, because we're not applying these consequences of saying like, oh, if you do this, I'll do this. But you're saying like, hey, like if that's what you're going to do, I'm going to take care of me. Like you have to be able to switch it around. So like, think of it this way. Like if you want to talk degrading, like that's totally fine, but it's not going to be around me. So part of the consequence of you deciding to continue to treat me in an abusive way means that you're not going to have access to me anymore. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. Like you're going to phrase it slightly different, but I'm trying to give you like the clearest way to be able to think through it, to describe it, to be able to say like, hey, you deciding to take care of you means there's going to be consequences to other people that want to manipulate you, that want to control you. Some of the consequences, they're not going to be able to do that anymore. They're not going to be able to control you. All right, think of it this way. Let's say a narcissistic parent, they drop by to your place unannounced a lot of times. Like just showing up and you're like, please, like just let me know to call ahead. Let me know what's going on. And so you're like, you establish that clear boundary of like, you need to call ahead. You need to arrange a visit. Okay? Let them know if you show up unannounced, you're not going to let them in. Okay? Now, is that controlling the other person? No. It's saying, hey, this is what I'm comfortable with based on our situation. This is something that I need your help in based on this situation. And this is something that I'm going to also limit if you do show up unannounced. I'm not going to let you in. You're not going to have a part of my life in that engagement because this is a boundary that I've set to work on myself, to protect myself. Okay, that's how it's going back to. We're not focusing this aspect on focusing on yourself in this selfish, manipulative way. Okay, you have to remember, like, that's some of the driver, because narcissistic parent or family member is going to make you feel like you're the one that's abusive. Like you're the one beating them up because of how you're actually limiting their access to you. So you have to be careful. That emotional manipulation oftentimes will come. All right, then you have to make sure you actually stick to your boundaries. You enforce them. Majority of times people say boundaries don't work are also the same people that do not follow through with enforcing their boundaries. That hey, I'm not comfortable doing this. And then the person does that, and then they continue in the relationship, or they continue interacting, or they continue talking just like nothing else happened. And then it's no wonder that the person's like, well, they obviously didn't respect their boundaries. They obviously didn't care about their boundaries. So that means it's not that big of a deal. Like, enforcing boundaries can be especially challenging when you're dealing with a toxic person. When you're dealing with a family member, with a parent, like, you may need to be very firm, but the biggest thing is very consistent, okay, in your communication with your actions to ensure that they're actually being respected. If you are not consistent in what you're communicating, in what you're telling them, don't be surprised that it backfires, that it doesn't work. When you have a boundary and you state the boundary and then you don't follow through, the other person knows it's not a big deal. So make sure that it is a big deal by you taking care of you and by enforcing those boundaries with making sure that this person doesn't have certain access to you, whatever that boundary might be. Okay? Think of it this way. Narcissistic parent validates your boundary by showing up and out. So we talked about that. Okay? Stick to your word and don't let them in. Okay? This is going to be extremely difficult. Because you'll be like, but I want to, but they're a parent, but I should. And as a result, you're telling them, hey, if you keep doing this, it's okay, I'll eventually give in. In this is the same thing that kids do. Like, if I keep pestering you over and over and over again and I get what I want, that means every single time to get what I want, I just keep pestering you. Like, I know if I do this and this and this, it's going to get a reaction and I'm going to get what I want. So why not do it? This is very clear that you have to be extremely consistent in the boundaries that you set. Understand that when you do not have consistent boundaries, the narcissist will keep rolling over you time and time and time again. They won't care about anything. Just getting what they want and knowing that they can always get what they want because you're not consistent with what you want. If you're in this place where you're struggling understanding boundaries, how to actually be able to move forward with us, I want to invite you to go to escapetoxicity.com. It's a great way to be able to start your healing journey to help understand boundaries, the toxicity that you've been involved in. And that could be for a parent, that could be for a family member, that could be for a partner, that could be for a spouse, whatever it might be. And being able to say, hey, I need to get the hard truths to be able to understand and to be able to heal, grow, change, and develop into the person you're called to be. If you want to reach out to me, if you want to talk to me one-on-one, we can start you down your healing journey at a more rapid pace. You can go to rawmotivations.com. Would love to talk to you there.